you reading this book for a class and don't really understand it?
Or you understand it and you need some ideas for themes to use in an essay or project?
Or maybe you just need a refresher on the book to study for a test.
Well, you've come to the right place. We'll be talking about some key themes of the book with pictures and other visuals to help you understand it very well. I'll be talking about the theme of isolation.
I'll be talking about the rigidity of the minds of the people.
I'll be talking about redemption and sin.
But before we get to that, we'll give you a quick summary of the book with no spoilers. Few stories capture the weight of judgment and the loneliness of being different, like in The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Hawthorne himself was born in 1804 Salem, Massachusetts, the same place where, a century earlier, his Puritan ancestors helped prosecute the infamous Salem witch trials. That legacy of harsh religion and moral absolutism haunted him. It became the seed of his lifelong exploration of guilt and the heavy chains of conscience. So, when Hawthorne wrote The Scarlet Letter in 1850, he wasn't just telling a story about a woman punished for adultery. He was holding up a mirror to America's Puritan past and asking whether moral rigidity destroys more souls than it saves.
The novel opens in the 17th century Boston, a world where the church and the law are one and the same. Into this world, Hester, Prime, commanded to wear the bright red letter A, branded as adultery marked for her sin. But the true punishment isn't the letter, it's the isolation and the shame. She's made as an example, cut off from her community and forced to raise her daughter, Pearl, who was born from her sinful act.
Meanwhile, Reverend Dimmesdale, the town's beloved minister, hides his own connection to Hester's sin. This guilt consumes him from within, and quiet punishment even harsher than hers. And then there's Roger Chillingworth, Hester's estranged husband, whose thirst for revenge twists him into something inhuman. A scarlet letter burned on your chest. A town that whispers every time you walk by. No friends, no support, just judgment. This is the world that Hester Prynne is forced to live in, a world of complete isolation from society. Hello everybody! In this segment, I'll be talking to you about the theme of isolation in the Scarlet Letter, and giving you a bit of a stepping stone to where you can start your research and learn a bit more about the book. I'll be introducing 2 articles and giving you a few key moments from the book with quotes. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hawthorne emphasizes Hester's complete alienation on page 82 of the Scarlet Letter, noting that in all her intercourse with society, there was nothing that made her feel as if she belonged to it. Every gesture, every word, and even the silence of those whom she came in contact implied and even often expressed that she was banished. The isolation that Hester was experiencing was not just the physical, like being locked in a cell, but it was a lot more. It was emotional and social. Nobody wanted to talk to her, and everybody made her feel like an outcast. In the article Passion and Authority in the Scarlet Letter, the author Nina Bam talks a lot about how Hester is torn between a genuine desire to feel that society has judged her rightly, and a far deeper, irrational conviction that what she has done is not sinful. This is about Hester's internal isolation rather than her external isolation. She wants to believe that society is right and that she deserves all the punishment and shame, but on the other hand, she feels like what she has done isn't truly sinful because she loves Dimmesdale. This conflict leaves her emotionally isolated. On page 85 of the book, Hester Prynne yet struggled to believe that no fellow mortal was guilty like herself. Hester was really trying to believe that no one else had ever sinned like she had, and that she's completely alone in her guilt. How she's thinking just shows how society has made her see herself different than everybody else, when in reality, everybody is flawed in one way or another, but their guilt and shame is hidden, just like Dimmesdale. This article talks about how Hester must reject the judgment of the letter, no matter how she assents to it. So let's break this quote down. Hester cannot let the letter define her. Assent to it means to agree or go along with something. On the outside, Hester accepts the community's judgment by wearing the Scarlet Letter and living quietly, but then reject the judgment of the letter means that in her heart she refuses to believe that she is the terrible sinner that society says she is. Hawthorne expresses how Hester never got used to the pain of the Scarlet Letter. The spot never grew callous. It seemed, on the contrary, to grow more sensitive with daily torture. Then, on top of that, Pearl amused herself with gathering handfuls of wild flowers and flinging them one by one at her mother's bosom, which pointed out the Scarlet Letter and reminded Hester of her sin constantly. This happened a lot. Hester chooses to stay in the same town that publicly shamed her, even though she could have left and started completely different somewhere else. In this article, Psychological Symbolism of Guilt and Isolation in Hawthorne, Atkins says, "In any place except a fictitious account would a person like Hester Prynne seek out perpetual punishment." This quote is basically saying, why would anyone willingly keep living in a place that constantly reminds them of their sin and punishment? Most people would just want to escape that pain, but Hester didn't. Staying symbolizes her acceptance of guilt and her taking responsibility. Hester's isolation completely reshapes her identity. She is distinguished from the fact that her whole life represents a depiction of the psychological response to a violation of a strongly socialized norm, even though through her punishment separates her and changes the way she thinks. So long as she remains in Boston, she is restrained from showing that this newly acquired radicalism by her obligations to Pearl. Her isolation forces her to grow, but it also traps her in the same society that refuses to accept her. Near the end of the book, Hester becomes more confident and people start to see her more for who she is rather than what she did. Many people refuse to interpret the Scarlet A as its original significance. They said that it meant able. Then later she takes off the Scarlet Letter, but then Pearl got confused and threw a fit because she didn't recognize her mother. This is very symbolic, showing that Hester's sin and punishment have been very tightly connected to who she is and who Pearl sees her as. In the end, Hester's isolation changes her completely. Being shut out from everyone makes her stronger and more independent. The Scarlet Letter was meant to bring shame to her, but it ends up showing her strength and resilience, proving that when someone's alone, they can still find purpose in who they are, just like Hester did.
Oh, apologies. But why are the people so initially unyielding? To answer that, we'll need some insight into the righteous colony of Massachusetts, where iniquity is dragged out into the sunshine. This small Boston settlement practices something called Puritanism, a Protestant movement where people believe that every action, law, and thought should reflect the word of the Bible to the letter. Get it? The Scarlet Letter? Yeah. There is so much interconnectedness of the people's rules and their faith that Hawthorne describes them as a people amongst whom religion and law were almost identical, and whose character both were so thoroughly interfused. Hawthorne spent a lot of his career and major works exploring the idea of Puritanism, so much so that Hawthorne's writings were almost invariably successful when they dealt with Puritan themes and almost a failure when they didn't. Back to Puritanism. This rigid system left no space for individuality or compassion. Sin wasn't seen as a personal struggle, but a crime against God and humanity. The Puritans viewed themselves as guardians of morality, responsible for dragging every sin into the light. And so, when Hester is found guilty of adultery, they react with outrage and a scary sense of righteousness. "This woman has brought shame upon us all, and ought to die," one woman cries. "Is there not law for it? Surely there is, both in the scripture and in the statute book." Clearly, they didn't like her. In that one line, Hawthorne captures how Puritanism viewed religious zeal with civil authority, using scripture as law and punishment as virtue. On a side tangent, it's pretty ironic how the Puritan law makes adultery punishable by death, when that is literally the opposite of what Jesus preached. Jesus stopped the angry crowd from stoning the woman that committed adultery in John 8, verse 1-11, emphasizing the need for forgiveness and understanding. The Puritans would have had Hester put to death, but they didn't because they decided not to put in force the extremity of our righteous law against her, and have her be shamed publicly, since they didn't know if Hester's husband was alive or not. Kinda crazy how the Puritans had the instruction manual for what not to do in that situation, but still would have messed it up. Anyway, this means that her private sin becomes a public spectacle that was successful in causing her shame. When Hester is put out on the pillory, it seemed like her first impulse was to clasp the infant, Pearl, closer to her bosom, not so much by an impulse of motherly affection, as that she might thereby conceal a certain token upon her breast. In her article about the symbols of guilt in Hawthorne's writing, Lewis Atkins states that pride shares many qualities with actual women, particularly with those who have violated the norms of a rigid social code. This is reflected in the fact that the focus of the Puritans is not on Hester rectifying her sin, but on making a show of her to the public. She becomes less of a person and more of a public sermon walking through the streets. In fact, the young and pure would be taught to look at her, with the scarlet letter flaming upon her breast, as the figure, the body, the reality of sin. Her shame is literal, stitched upon the fabric of her clothes, and used as an example of what happens when you don't follow their rules. Spoiler warning, skip to this timestamp if you don't want to know the spoilers. Okay, now that those guys are gone, we can get into some deeper themes. Even Reverend Dimmesdale, the pious minister who secretly shares in Hester's guilt, wink wink, is trapped by the same system. So, Dimmesdale hides his sin, torturing himself in private rather than risk the public humiliation that Hester endured. Even years later, Hester is still haunted by the community's rigid expectations. In chapter 8, when the magistrates threaten to take Pearl away, they tell her, "Speak thou, thy child's own mother, were it not for thy own good, thou wouldst have no claim to keep her." The Puritans don't even see Pearl as a child to be cared for. She's viewed as Hester's punishment for what she did, and will be taken away from her in any other case because of Hester's sin. That's kind of messed up. Yet, Hawthorne also gives us a glimpse of something more hopeful. In a way, Hester herself embodies the same complexity. Her decision to stay and bear the torture of the Scarlet Letter isn't driven by repentance, but of love. Her suffering is not the price she has agreed to pay for her guilt, but the cost she's glad to bear for her love. And perhaps that's a reflection of Hawthorne's beliefs. His views on Puritanism were not one of disdain. Instead, he pursued a middle course. He separated himself from the Puritans without joining their opponents, which is one thing the Puritans themselves didn't get. They didn't have the understanding that people make mistakes and shouldn't be loved any less because of that.
Redemption. What is more about altering what makes you feel ashamed than it is about receiving forgiveness? In the Scarlet Letter, Hawthorne tells the story of how sin and guilt are not just about God, but change the meaning of herself. The very title of the book is a sign. The smallest of literary units, the character standing for no more than a speech. Sam Johnson. Barbara Johnson analyzes how the novel is less about morality, more so for interpretation, how a symbol can change and evolve until it becomes something entirely new. Beginning of the sign. On the breast of her gown, in fine red cloth, surrounded with an elaborate embroidery and fantastic flourishes of gold thread, appeared the letter A. The moment Hester is first seen by the crowd of the town, her punishment becomes public. Shame to humiliation in artistry. The symbol doubles in meaning. Things begin to change. They said that it meant eight. So strong was Hester crying. With a woman's strength, the meaning of the letter is evolving. With it once being adultery, it is now a meaning of eight. Johnson portrays this as an unstable of signs, example of how meaning cannot stay the same. Redemption through interpretation. Do you see that woman with the embroidery badge? It is our Hester, the town's own Hester, who is so kind to the poor, so helpful to the sick, so comfortable to the affected. The public sees her as one of the people, whose redemption comes not by forgiveness but through transformation. The townspeople are reading her differently, but she is changing, as well as many people refuse to interpret the Scarlet Letter by its original significance. The community reads her very differently from herself. It was different, and it is different. Symbol. Once
Scarlet Letter does not solve the mystery of sin. It transforms sin itself into the mystery of interpretation. Her thesis has proven the meaning is not morality, but rather a driving force for redemption as a whole. Confession as transformation. The gesture revealing the Scarlet Letter on her chest mirrors Hester's original humiliation, linking their fates and moral journeys. Boudman proves that existing is all around us, but is no longer clearly seeable, and we humans are now to interpret it ourselves. As Hester confesses, it helps her to reflect on her life. Understanding herself instead of listening creates self-growth and finding meaning, helping to transform her. Insight through experience. Hester soon learns that what was once limitations is now becoming freedom. The letter A, for example, begins by signifying adultery, but quickly acquires new meaning. Able, angel, America, even art. Johnson shows that transformation mean new lead to knowledge and creativity. For Hester, this is coming from the ground of living through shame and learning from it. Right at the bottom and moving up the ladder. It is a growth period for her. Growth into compassion. After Pearl was born, Hester questions her existence later on, and the poor little creature had been born at all. Indeed, the same dark question often arose into her mind with reference to the whole race of womanhood. Johnson sees this as the letter which once linked her to sin now connects her to others' suffering. As Pearl will go through this, and there are consequences to this. A new perception and a lasting emblem. The Scarlet Letter has given Hester many things and is a key symbol to her insight and awareness. Johnson says it means that it is her redemption and that she learns from the world. Even in death, the letter does not mean shame, but identity. Letter A had become a universal sign for the human condition itself. Johnson stated that A is the origin. It is no longer about sin, but the endless act of acknowledgement.
Let's recap. Hester is very isolated by the community. She struggles with feeling like she's the only one who's ever sinned at the extremity of her own sin, but in reality, that is not the case. It never stops hurting having the Scarlet Letter and having people staring at her and whispering about her all the time. At the end, people start to see Hester as Abel instead of adulteress, but Pearl sees her mother with that stamp and barely recognizes her without it.
Hester's isolation is a result of the culture and the time she lives in. Hawthorne calls out the unforgiving Puritan settlement for their use of religion as a tool for judgment instead of compassion. Through the shame and guilt felt by Hester and Dimmesdale, Hawthorne critiqued the hypocrisy of people claiming to follow the Bible without its central message of mercy.
Conclusion. Hester's transformation from sin to growth is a key stepping stone for herself, Pearl, and the community. The original meaning of the letter A evolves and deepens in meaning, symbolizing her learning and acknowledgement. Throughout this, Hester pushes through her struggles, gaining insight into her personal and public life achieved within her journey.
Thank you so much for watching this video about the themes of the Scarlet Letter. We really hope this helped you gain a better insight into the book. Bye!